Welcome to the CUPP, where we will be spilling all sorts of tea about what's going on inside Washington, D.C., what regulators and lawmakers are working on and thinking about, and what you and your credit union should be focused on in terms of risk areas and areas of opportunity. My name is Ann Petros. I'm your host and Vice President of Regulatory Affairs here at NAFCU. Today, I am joined by Dustin DeVore, who is a leading credit union expert and attorney at the law firm of Kaufman Canoles. Dustin is chair of the firm's credit union team. He regularly advises clients on a variety of compliance issues. So thank you, Dustin, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent.
For having me.
Yeah, happy to have you. So what do you see as the top compliance issues for credit unions today?
Yeah, well, I regularly work with a number of credit unions, everyone from CEOs to vice presidents to compliance officers, lending officers. So I think I have a pretty broad area that I deal with. So I'd say right now, fraud. Fraud is just so rampant right now, unfortunately, in a number of areas. Overdraft issues. We're seeing a number of overdraft lawsuits, unfortunately, against our clients and nationally. And probably fair credit continues to be an issue, just a constant stream of both complaints to the regulatory agencies, Better Business Bureaus, and lawsuits regarding every issue you can imagine with fair credit, probably especially with reporting to the CRAs. And yeah, it's just, I'd say we deal with some reporting issue almost every day, if not 2 or 3 times a week with a credit union, because the rules are so complicated. Anybody who claims to be an expert, be careful, because all these rules are so complicated, unfortunately. And I'd say 99% of our clients think they're doing the right thing and try to do the right thing. Unfortunately, because the rules are so complicated, not just in fair credit, but in so many of these areas, you can think and try to do the right thing and not do the right thing and end up either in a lawsuit or end up with an NCUA finding after an exam. So that's just a need for diligence.
Certainly. Yeah. Well, nobody, wants to get themselves sued or, end up with a finding in the exam process. And certainly no one wants to, put consumers in a bad position. But, NAFCU's been pretty involved with filing some amicus briefs in Fair Credit Reporting Act cases across the country.
Oh, great.
So we are seeing a good bit of that as well. So, I guess I'm not happy to hear that you're seeing a lot of it, but it sort of confirms, what we've been focused on as well. But let's dig into fraud, as that is a topic that we've been hearing a ton about from our members, especially throughout the pandemic. We saw fraud cases on the rise and increase, dramatically, really, over the past couple of years. But one thing in particular that our members have complained about is P2P Payment Platforms, and how credit unions are managing increased risk associated with consumers operating on Venmo, Zelle, whatever other platform they may be using. So how are credit unions managing this risk and the error resolution requirements under Regulation E? What are you seeing from your clients?
Yeah, well, I guess for our listeners, Zelle is the one where there's, at least I've seen the most litigation. Fortunately, I don't see any wood here. I'd knock on it, but we've not had any of our credit union clients have any issues with Zelle. I'm not sure how many of them actually are using Zelle. I know some are. Venmo obviously is I think Venmo's half or 3/4 the size of Zelle. I'm not sure the exact size. I know Zelle's much larger, but for those who aren't real familiar with Zelle, it's owned by I think it's 6 or 7 of the largest banks.
That's right.
B of A and I think Wells Fargo maybe, and
Wells, JP
yeah,
Morgan,
yeah,
Chase.
yeah, and they got together, have this technology, which acts as a peer-to-peer or person-to-person payment scheme. And what's happening is, and this is similar to some of the fraud we're seeing, is one of their customers will sign up for Zelle. They'll get a text that says, "Hey, I'm from the Zelle wire department or the Zelle compliance department, or give us a call, and because we think there's been some sort of activity that wasn't approved on your account." People will call the number thinking that they're calling either the bank or Zelle, and end up giving out information, or end up using Zelle to send money to this other account, and then poof, it's gone. And the big issue that's popped up in these in these Zelle lawsuits is the fact that the banks argue that they don't have to make their customer whole because it was the customer that initiated the transaction. And it's not like credit cards where if there's a fraud, normally you're going to get made whole, or at least have the opportunity to be made whole. So in this case, the class action suits and other suits are based on that fraud. So right now, as I said, we've not been involved in any of those suits. We've been involved in a number of other suits, but I've got my fingers crossed.
Now, you also mentioned overdraft, and obviously the CFPB has been zeroing in on so-called junk fees, which we vehemently disagree with that label and don't think that...
Me too.
We don't think that there are junk fees in the financial services industry. Everything is disclosed clearly and conspicuously up front, and consumers know exactly what they're signing up for. But the CFPB claims that certain types of overdraft fees and non-sufficient funds fees are exactly, these sorts of junk fees. So what are you seeing with respect to overdraft and NSF fees? Yeah,
unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of those suits. We've had 3 or 4 of them just in the last 2 months, I think, come in.
Oh, wow.
And you'll see the same plaintiffs' firms over and over. And, they're recruiting aggressively on the internet, elsewhere, unfortunately. And
so it's those websites that say, have you been a victim of
there's I don't know if you've
fees?
seen the 8 million ads for the Camp Lejeune lawsuits, or Camp Lejeune water.
Yes.
Yeah, I was in the Marines before I went to law school and was stationed at Camp Lejeune, fortunately, after the water issue. But there's a reason 8,000 law firms are running those ads constantly. They work.
Yeah.
And it's the same in the overdraft. In the lawsuits, in the complaints themselves, it's really interesting. We obviously think that they're pretty weak cases. For the reasons you said, there's opt-in, there's all kinds of disclosures, and it's a real benefit to the member. And it's interesting when you look at the complaints, a lot of them spend a good part of the complaint citing things like CFPB news releases,
blogs and bulletins.
Right. Yeah. It's not even the law that they're citing.
No,
it's, well, look, everyone's saying they're junk fees and they're bad, but let's be clear. Overdraft fees are legal.
Right.
They are not illegal. And
in fact, they're, as you alluded to, a service that consumers want. We regularly hear that from our members.
Yeah. So here's the key point in all of this with overdraft that I think a lot of people miss, Ann, and it's this. What's the next step? So let's assume all overdraft and NSF fees are gone, okay, are illegal. Let's say you have a single mom on a very small income and struggling to make ends meet, and she pays her electric bill, okay, and the check bounces. If she has overdraft, obviously she's okay.
Right.
Well, let's say she doesn't, okay, because they've been made illegal. Well, that check's going to bounce. What's the electric company going to do? they're not going to take her checks anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to pay her electric bill, she's going to have to either go in and pay by cash, or she's going to have to figure, or with a certified check,
Mm-hmm.
or she's going to have to figure out some other way to pay it.
Mm-hmm.
So have we helped that low income member
Right.
by getting rid of overdraft? It doesn't make sense to me. Now we can argue about how much the fee should it be? Should it be $35? Should it be $25? I don't know. I'm not an expert on that type of finance, but I don't understand the argument that getting rid of these fees helps consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And additionally, they say, well, banks and credit unions are making a fortune off these fees.
Mm-hmm.
Well, credit unions I don't know about banks, but credit unions don't make a fortune on anything.
Right. Yeah.
It's a credit union.
Yeah. This is not a profit generating product and service.
That's right. And even when you look at the credit unions that are paying direct dividends to their members, that's
Mm-hmm.
great. But no one's getting rich off those.
No.
So I think it's really I don't think anyone has thought through to the end, what does this mean? It sounds great politically. Oh, I'm against junk fees and I'm against overdraft fees because I'm for the little guy and little girl. But I don't think what's the next step? What comes next? And I think it hurts people more. Just like the over disclosing with mortgages and things like that. Mm-hmm. It's gotten to the point where no one reads any of that, when they're sitting at the closing table.
No, you just sign on the line and keep moving, keep flipping pages.
Exactly.
Right. That's how it works. Can you talk to me specifically about the authorized positive, settled negative issue? That is the main focus,
yeah,
it's a surprise fee.
We've seen that. And for those who don't know, what that means is someone runs their debit. They walk into the supermarket, grocery store, they run their debit card, and it's approved. Mm-hmm. But another transaction that they had previously entered into.
That's pending.
Yeah, that's pending, then hits their account. Oh, sorry, that is now a negative, and they end up paying a fee. We have talked to a number of our clients about that, and my understanding is that the large software vendors that our credit unions deal with are working on that, and there are ways to fix it. A lot of the lawsuits we're seeing, though, are on the double charge, the double charge issue, and there's another term for it that's escaping me right now. But and what that is, as you know, is where you, for example, go to give someone a check, the vendor or the store runs the check through, it bounces, you get charged a fee. They then run it through again, and you get charged a second fee. Mm-hmm. And what CFPB and the regulatory agencies and a lot of the plaintiffs' attorneys are saying is, hey, that's all one transaction. You shouldn't have to pay multiple fees on that. What the financial industry argues is, well, no, that's all part of the same transaction. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing that as well. And again, on a lot of this, I've yet to see clear evidence, and maybe you have. I mean, you're in this as much or more than I am. Yet to see clear evidence of a statute or a final regulation that says a lot of this you can't do. No,
it doesn't exist.
No, right, exactly. It's all, we don't like it.
Right.
And again, that's why it's interesting in a lot of these lawsuits. They cite a lot of this guidance and press releases and things like that. Right. But they can't cite statutes because they're not there.
No, it's not in the statute. It's not even in the commentary on the regulations, right? It's not codified in any way. It's just, this seems improper, seems unfair, seems inappropriate. So we're going to talk about it as if it's illegal and then go from there.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right. And
it's unfortunate.
And some of it, like the authorized positive, settled negative, I don't think anyone had even thought of that a few years ago. That's something that technology has has brought on. It's not like credit unions or the financial industry has, figured out a way. Oh, here's how we're going to charge
Right.
people
It's not as
more.
if it was purposeful.
Right.
You
Yeah.
sort of uncovered that this was happening because you can see all of your transactions, the moment that they go through.
Exactly. Exactly.
Consumers are catching on.
Which goes back to, I know we may talk some more about fraud, but just it's so critical for credit unions to constantly pound into their members the idea, check your account.
Right.
Yeah, I check mine almost every day.
As you should.
I have I'm a proud credit union member, and every day I check my account. And you've got to be vigilant.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That is the big takeaway for institutions to, encourage their members just to pay close attention. It's your account, it's your money. And, institutions are doing the best that they can. They don't want to, do you dirty, but it's up to you to monitor your, financial transactions. So yeah, let's get back into fraud and what are specific types of wire fraud that you're seeing these days?
Yeah, wire fraud continues to be a big one. And I sort of divide wire fraud into two areas. The first area is, and I'm sure there's a better term for it, but what I call external wires, meaning wires from member accounts to third parties. And then the other area is wires, what I could call it an internal wire, which is really not what it is, but that's how I think of it. A wire from the credit union's operating accounts to someone else. For example, when the credit union pays a law firm or pays NAFQ or pays whoever. So on the member wire side, yes, continue to see a lot of fraud. And again, to be clear, that's where the member walks into the branch, says, hi, I'd like to wire my sister in Topeka, Kansas, $50,000. Here's her account. And I found that most of our clients have pretty good standard operating procedures, checklists, things like that, for those types of wires. Absolutely critical that, on wires, and a lot of this goes back to, people I think rely too much on technology sometimes. Absolutely critical that phone calls get made, to the other institution to make sure you have the correct routing numbers and the correct wire numbers and all of that. It's so easy to get just one number wrong. And we're actually have dealt with several situations through the years where one number was off and it goes to the wrong account or the wrong institution. And then, you end up spending a fortune trying to get the money back.
Right.
On what I call the internal wires, that's a situation where, say you have, let's say the vice president of lending or the CFO sends an email to accounting and says, please wire $10,000 to NAFQ, let's say. And the person in accounting gets that email, says, oh, look, the CFO, Ann, emailed me with wire information, said email NAFQ, and they go ahead and do it. Well, guess what? That email wasn't from the CFO. Right. It was a fraudster that somehow had made an exact replica of your email, made it look totally legit.
Which happens all the
time. Yeah. Well, guess what? The person in accounting never picked up the phone to call you or call the CFO and say, hey, I got this email from you. Are you sure you want to wire $10,000 to NAFQ? And that's happening a lot.
So it may be a legitimate, institution or organization, but the routing information is not.
Oh yeah, it goes to
that institution.
It goes to the Nigerian prince, or
right.
It goes to it
wherever.
Goes, yeah, God knows where.
The fraudsters located.
Yeah, and the money's gone, and you're never going to see it again. So we see that, and then there's another one going around where, and I've seen people fall prey to this. You get an email, member gets an email, and it looks like it's from the, Fairfax County Circuit Court. And it says, you have unpaid parking tickets and you were supposed to show up in court yesterday and you didn't. If you don't pay $5,000 by 5 o'clock today, we are going to have to arrest you tomorrow morning at 9
Oh, geez,
at 9
that's
a.m.
scary.
It is. And it looks legit.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people say, holy, you know what? I don't want to go to jail.
Right.
So they wire the money to the number at the bottom. And guess what? It's not the Fairfax Circuit Court. So where all this goes, where this all goes back to is pick up the phone and call and confirm.
Right.
It's just so crucial.
Yeah.
And don't necessarily call the number if it says call this number, you know.
Yeah, that's not going to help.
Look up the Fairfax Circuit Court and call them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very common one that's going around right now. So we see all kinds of stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And that reminds me of, countless voicemails that I've received over the years of like the IRS is, looking at your account and you haven't paid taxes and whatever. And we're going to start, an action against you and you have to pay X amount, by whenever, right? Though that's
exactly
age old scam.
Yep. And then, a lot of members falling, victim to romance scams, where.
And I feel like those increased over the pandemic as well.
Big time, because people were lonely and a lot of people spent a lot of time by themselves and they were searching out connections with people.
Right.
So, unfortunately, this world we live in is full of people that want to take advantage of other people. So you just have to be really diligent.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, with that too, it's just your run of the mill sort of, fraud scam, oh, send me money, honey. I really need it for XYZ. Right.
Yeah.
But
like they'll
then they disappear.
They'll send a picture, let's say you have a member that lives here in Arlington, members cooped up in their apartment during COVID. Like you said, they're lonely. So they seek out, connections on the internet. They get a picture of what they think is a, beautiful woman in California or wherever. And before you know it, they're sending pictures back and forth and he thinks he has this great online relationship. It's actually, some 350-pound guy in Bulgaria, who's doing this. And then, after a few days or a few weeks, she strikes and he gets that email. Hey, I'd really like to come visit you, but I can't afford the plane ticket. Mm-hmm. Can you, or I need an operation. I found out I have cancer and, people try to, help other people and they send a wire, thinking it's going to California for her plane ticket to come visit them. And it's actually gone to, God knows where overseas. So, or here. So it's a lot of that going around. And again, it all just goes back to being super careful.
Right. Yeah. That vigilance is key.
Absolutely.
So another type of fraud that, has been increasing recently and throughout the pandemic, is, elder fraud and elder financial abuse. And, the CFPB has been very focused on their Office of Older Americans and, spreading information about the, increase in this type of abuse and fraud. So, what types of elder abuse are most common and how can financial institutions, credit unions help their members to avoid this sort of fraud?
It's so sad.
It really is.
We do see a lot of this. And first of all, the good news is that a lot of states like Virginia, for example, have shield statutes, meaning that the credit union is protected if it thinks there is elder abuse. So, for example, we see a lot of this. You have an elderly member who's, let's say, 85, 90 years old. They have $500,000 sitting in a share savings account. They come into the branch with their 50-year-old, daughter or 30-year-old granddaughter. And the elderly member says, I want to give all my money to my granddaughter, or I want to give $100,000 to my granddaughter. Or the elderly member can barely speak, because they have dementia or physical ailments, and they come in and the granddaughter says, yes, my grandmother wants to give me $100,000 out of her account. And frequently the manager or the frontline person, the teller, whoever they're with, it's tough, right? Because the granddaughters or the daughter's right there, the elderly person's there, and they're nodding their head, yes, I'd like to do it. And the key thing to remember there is, again, you're protected as a credit union generally. If you have a good faith, reasonable suspicion that there is some sort of fraud going on, you can say, hey, let's stop. Let's go talk to a manager. Let's, we want to do some due diligence on this to protect you.
Right. Let's sit down, dig into the details just to make sure there's no instance of undue influence.
That's right. That's right. Now, you also don't have a duty as a credit union. Right? Credit union is not a doctor. You don't have to determine, does this person have dementia or not?
Do your best to assess the situation.
Exactly. And it's nice to know that unless you do something grossly negligent or really horrible, that you're going to be protected if that member tries or the granddaughter or daughter tries to bring suit against a credit union saying somehow they were harmed because you were worried about the elder abuse. So we see that. We see a lot of one of the things that we do a lot for credit unions is look at powers of attorney. 35-year-old man will walk in, say, hey, I have full power of attorney for my elderly mother, and I want to move $100,000 out of her account. And it's crucial that those powers of attorney be very carefully reviewed, because we see a lot of powers of attorney that are not not necessarily fraudulent, but they're not executed properly, or they don't contain the appropriate language, or every once in a while we'll see one where we're like, where did they get this? It looks like a third grader wrote it. So we see a lot of that. And then finally, unfortunately, a lot of elder people are really good with technology, surprisingly. My mother-in-law is amazing with technology, and she's almost 80 years old. But they are very prone to technological scams, like the romance scams, because you have a lot of lonely elderly people. They're very susceptible to the types of frauds like I talked about, where someone says, hey, we're going to take your Social Security away if you don't pay this, those types of things. So I think what credit unions can do to help their elderly folks is to, just constantly reminding them to be careful and check their accounts. And if they have a situation where someone is asking them to wire them money, come ask the credit union, hey, what do you think about this?
Right. And there are a lot of resources available as well. I know some from the CFPB that, you can have in your branch and, available to your members, just to make sure they're aware of all of these different types of scams, right?
Yep. And one of the nice things is, elderly members a lot of times do go into the branches a lot.
Right. And
I know because my credit union's right across the street from my office, and I'm in there a couple days a week sometimes. And a lot of times I'm the youngest person in there, and I'm 51. And they know the tellers, they know the managers. So there's a nice relationship there. Right. A lot of times, and they're not anonymous. So that's a good opportunity when they have those contacts for the frontline people to say, hey, you doing okay?
Right.
And when they do bring in something that looks a little off, to say something.
Right. So generally, what is your advice to credit unions, how they can do their best to avoid fraud, whatever kind of fraud it may be?
Yeah, we've been seeing so much fraud that a month or so ago, we actually put together a 15 or 20 page list of suggestions for our clients on how to avoid fraud. Everything from
Excellent.
wire to elderly to, we still see check kiting. We still see, that movie Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio.
I just watched it again the other day.
There you
it's
go.
A great movie.
Yeah, exactly. People still do that.
A lot of check fraud.
Yeah, it's amazing. I hear a lot of people say, wow, I haven't written a check in 6 months or a year, because they do everything online, but there still are millions of checks, cut. But the key things to avoid fraud, I'd say the most important is to have SOP, standard operating procedures and checklists for everything.
Yeah.
How do we deal with wires? How do we deal with a situation where we think there might be elder abuse? How do we deal with, situations where we have a check that we think there may be an issue, so that the frontline tellers and managers, assistant managers can say, man, what do I do in this situation? And they can pull open the binder, or they can go on, the credit union intranet and look up, okay, here's what I do. I have to send a wire. Here are the things I need to do to make sure that it's kosher. And the key thing is, again, be high tech, have good firewalls in place and things like that, but be low tech also. Pick up the phone and call. Pick up the phone and say, hey, is this legit? Let me confirm the wiring instruction. I know our law firm, we send a lot of wires. Obviously, we do a lot of real estate closings and settlements and things for clients. And that's our standard operating procedure is if someone sends you wiring information, our paralegals are required to pick up the phone, call the other side, and confirm the number, confirm where it's going, and make sure that it's legit. So I'd say standard operating procedures, checklists, constantly telling your members to check their accounts. You can't do that enough. Please check your account online or on your phone. It's easy to do to make sure. And if you see something that doesn't look right, come in and tell us, or call the help center. Yeah.
I personally get very nervous about wires. I prefer cashier's checks and certified checks. I don't go that route.
Yeah. Another thing too is for the credit unions that offer credit cards, which most of our clients do, is to make sure that your credit card vendor has strong fraud protections in place. For example, with my credit card, I probably, just because I travel some and I use my credit card a lot, I'll get a text from the credit card vendor probably once a month or so that says, hey, is this a legit transaction?
Right.
And I like getting those because it means they're looking out for me. So those are just a few of the things that credit unions can do to try to avoid fraud. Unfortunately, fraud is here. It ain't going away.
Right.
So
there's no real way to completely eliminate it or have processes to make sure that you cut it down to zero.
Yep.
It's not going to happen.
And some of these fraudsters are so smart. It's a shame. I think they could make a lot of money in the legit world.
Yeah. Very sophisticated.
Yeah. Yeah, they really are.
So. Yeah. All right. Well, any other thoughts on fraud or compliance issues generally that you want our viewers and listeners to be aware of? Yeah,
I'd say again, I would make sure you have a culture of compliance, a culture of avoiding fraud, And I think it's very, very important to have an organization where your employees and your members feel comfortable saying something if they see something. The famous Homeland Security line. If you see something, say something, right? But that's important in credit union world too. If you see something and it doesn't feel right, run it up the chain. And again, it's for credit union CEOs and vice presidents and CFOs and heads of lending. It's important to have an open dialogue type environment and an environment where people feel comfortable going to the person above them, knowing that they're not going to get in trouble or that they'll be taken seriously when they do do say, hey, I think something's off here. Because a lot of times your gut will be right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's important to pay attention and take those comments and feedback seriously.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that does it for this episode. Thank you, Dustin, for joining me. And thank you for tuning in to this exciting discussion on compliance issues with a focus on fraud. If you enjoy watching or listening to the CUPP, please hit the like button on your favorite streaming platform, subscribe to get notifications about our latest episodes, and also leave us a review. We'd also love to hear about topics that you're interested in so that we can feature those on a future episode. Thanks so much, and until next time.